Section 14 of A Dozen Ways of Love by Lily Dougall. The Soul of a Man. Chapter 1. A man was standing on one of the high roads in the south of Gloucestershire. He was a man of science. His tools and specimens were in his hand, and he was leaning against the wayside paling, enjoying a well-earned rest. A long flock of birds fluttered over the autumn fields. Beneath them, a slow ploughman trudged with his horses, breaking the yellow stubble. The sky hung low, full of sunshine, yet full of haze. An atmosphere of blue flame, and the earth was bright with the warm autumn colours of woods and hedgerow. Just as the birds were flying past, a young woman came by upon the road, treading with quick, powerful step upon the fallen leaves. She was a poor woman. Her beauty, which would have been almost perfect in a simpler gown, was marred by garments cut in cheap conformity to fashionable dress. It could not be hidden, however, and her large symmetrical figure, swinging as she walked, attracted the attention of the man as he stood there, leaning against the paling. He felt by no means disinclined to while away his hour of rest by a few soft words with the comely stranger. If he had put his thoughts into words, he would have held it as good luck that she had come to amuse his leisure, thinking very little about luck as it concerned her. His dog, lying at his feet, stirred to look at the woman, and the man, following the same instinct of nature, accosted her. "Can you tell me, my girl, what time it is?" She stopped short and looked at him. "That I can't, sir," she said in clear, hearty tones, and turned to continue her walk. "But tell me what time you think it is, my good girl. I'm not good at reading the sun." She turned again, and looking at him with a longer pause, but if there was suspicion or disapproval in her thoughts, she expressed nothing in her face. "You're a gent. I'd have thought you'd have had a watch." "But mine is at the watchmaker's getting mended," he said with a smile. He was neither young nor handsome, but he was clever, and that goes further than either in dealing with a woman. She still stood staring at him in rude independence. "The shadows is longer than they was a while, boy. Maybe it's 3. He sighed and shifted his position wearily against the paling, as though faint with fatigue. "You can't tell me of any place near where I can get something to eat. I've been working hard since daybreak, and now I am out of my reckoning and tired and hungry." He glanced down at his tools and earth-stained clothes. He won his wish. The woman, who would not have tarried a moment for selfish pleasure, remained out of generous pity. "I've the piece mother put up. Maybe it's bigger now for we two. But I could not think of taking your luncheon," he exclaimed with a gallantry that was meant to be impressive, but was quite lost on his practical companion. She proceeded to open her parcel and examine the contents to see whether or not there was enough for 2. He also examined it critically with his eyes, in some alarm at her prompt response to his appeal. But the thick slices of bread and meat, if not dainty, were clean and of excellent quality. She took the largest and thickest bit and thrust it into his hand, very much as a mother would feed her child with the portion she considered its fair share. You may have that, for I shan't want it." "You're very kind," he said, with a touch of sarcasm too fine for her. It appeared that, having taken out the food, she thought well to make her own meal, for she went a few steps farther on and, sitting down on the grass with her back to the paling, began to eat. A large tuft of weeds grew midway between him and her. Truly, we can foresee consequences but a very little way in our dealings with a fellow creature, and this man, as he stood munching his bread, uncertain how to proceed in winning favour from the bold beauty, was hardly pleased with the result of his encounter. His dog went and laid its head upon her knee, and she fed it with crumbs. Its master, after watching them a minute, stepped out on the road with the intention of sitting down between them and the weeds. As he did so, he caught sight, as he thought, of a man seated in the very place he intended to occupy. So strong was the impression that he started and stared. But again, as before, there was no one to be seen. The sunshine was bright upon all things. The palings were so far apart that he could see everything in the fields behind. There was no one far or near but the ploughman at half a field's distance, and they two and the dog. The woman turned coolly round and looked through the paling, as if she supposed he had seen something behind her. "Was it a hare?" she asked, eyeing him with interest. "Ye ain't feared of the like of that." "No, it was not a hare. I did not see a hare." "What was it ye seed then?" she asked, looking at him with bold determination. "What did I see?" he repeated vaguely. "I saw nothing." "Thought ye looked as if you'd seed something," she remarked incredulously, and then went on eating and feeding the dog, as indifferent to his presence as she was to the presence of the weeds. "Are ye going far tonight?" he asked at length, thinking he would make more progress toward friendship before he sat down. "To the tune." "Indeed, as far as that? Which town, may I ask?" he said with mechanical politeness, for his mind was running on what he had seen. "Ye're a fool, and no a mistake," she replied with emphasis. "There's but one town within a walk." "On the contrary, I'm considered a man of great learning," he replied, with more eager self-assertion than he could hitherto have believed possible under the circumstances. "Is it larning ye got?" she asked, with much greater interest than she had before evinced. "Yes, I'm a man who spends his life seeking for knowledge." "Are ye wiser nor parson?" "Very much wiser," replied the man of science, with honest conviction. She looked much more impressed than he had hoped, and thinking that he had made himself sufficiently interesting, he began to speak about her own affairs, supposing they would please her better. "You're not a married woman," he said, looking at her ringless hand. "Married or no," she replied, "it's nowt to you." "I beg your pardon. Everything which concerns such a beautiful woman must be of interest to me." At that she laughed outright in hard derision and went on eating her bread and meat. "But you won't tell me if you're married or not," he pleaded, pursuing a subject which he thought must interest her. He was surprised to see the sudden expression of womanly sorrow that came over her face, giving her eyes new depth and light. She answered him sadly looking past him into the sunny distance. No, nor like to be. I must disagree with you there. If you are not married yet, I am sure you will be very soon. I never saw a more likely lassie than yourself. Manlike, he was quite unconscious of the consummate impertinence of the form this compliment had taken. But afterwards, he realized it when his idle words recurred to his mind. She turned her eyes full upon him and said with energy, "Ye know nought at all about it," and then added more meditatively, "Neither do parson." She had been so absorbed in her thoughts for a few minutes that she had ceased to stroke the dog, and resenting this, it raised its silky head from her lap and laid it upon her breast. Thus reminded, she smiled down into the eyes of the dog and caressed it, pressing its head closer against her bosom. The man stood a few paces away, watching these two beautiful creatures as they sat in the hazy autumn sunlight, with their background of weeds and moss-grown paling. He felt baffled and perplexed, for he knew that he stood apart, excluded from their companionship by something he could not define. So intolerable did this feeling become that he resolved to break through it and made a hasty movement to sit down beside them. But as he stepped forward, he was suddenly aware that there was another man in the place he would have taken, embracing and protecting the girl. He swore a loud oath and flung himself backwards to stand by the hedge on the opposite side of the road, that he might the better review the situation. It was all as it had been before, that quiet autumn landscape, only the woman appeared much interested in his sudden movements. "What was it you seed? Was it a snake?" she inquired loudly, at the same time moving her skirts to look for that dangerous reptile. "No!" he shouted, putting his whole energy into the word. "What was it you seed, cutting them capers as if ye was shot, and saying o' words neither fit for heaven above nor earth beneath?" So loudly did she ask, and so resolutely did she wait for an answer, that he was forced into speech. "I don't know," he said, with another oath, milder than the first. "Well, sure now," she said, still speaking loudly. "Here's something awful queer. Ye says you're a man that's got larning more than our parson, and ye see something, and can't tell what ye seed. That's twice this short a while. Are ye often took bad the like of that?" The bold derision of this speech fell without effect upon its object, because he perceived a gleam of mischievous intelligence in her eyes, which she had intended to conceal, but she was no adept in the art of concealment. The conviction that the woman knew perfectly what he had seen and did not in reality despise him for his conduct took the sting from her jeers, but did not make his position pleasanter. The repeated shock to his nerves had produced a chilly feeling of desperation and almost fear, which he could not immediately shake off, and he stood back against the opposite hedge, with his half-eaten bread in his hand, conscious that he looked and felt more like a whipped schoolboy than, as he had fondly imagined when he first stopped the woman, the hero of a rural love scene. That was nothing. He was, as he had described himself, a man who devoted his life to the search for knowledge, and personal consciousness was almost lost in the intense curiosity which the circumstances had aroused in him. With the trained mind of one accustomed to investigation, he instantly perceived that his only clue to the explanation of the phenomenon lay in the personality of the woman. His one eager desire was to probe her thought through and through. But how was he to approach the interior portals of a mind guarded by a will as free and strong as his own? He would fain have bound down her will with strong cords and analyzed the secrets of her mind with ruthless vivisection. But how? His tact, trained by all the subtleties of a life cast in cultured social relations, was unequal to the occasion, and fearing to lose ground by a false step, he remained silent. The woman finished eating and shook herself free of the crumbs. He supposed, almost with a sense of desperation, that she was about to leave him before he could begin his inquiry. But instead of moving, she motioned him to come near, and he went and stood on the road in front of her. "Ye says you're a man of learning, and I believes ye," she began. He was about to reply that he was only a seeker after truth, but he was checked by the knowledge that she would accept no answer she could not understand. He fell back on the truth as it was to her and said simply, "Yes. I wants to ask ye 2 questions. Will you answer like an honest man?" She had laid aside all her loud rudeness and was speaking with intense earnestness, an earnestness that won his entire respect. "I will indeed answer you honestly, if I can answer." "Then tell me this, what's the soul of a man?" He stood with lips sealed, partly by surprise at the question and partly by self-acknowledged ignorance of the answer. "The soul of a man," she repeated more distinctly. "Ye knows what I mean, Charlie." Yes, he knew what she meant, but he knew also that his own most honest convictions hovered between a materialist philosophy and faith in the spiritual unseen. If at that moment he could have decided between the two, he would gladly have done so, for the sake of the eager woman sitting at his feet. But he knew that he did not know which was the truth. She, still laboring under the impression that she had not made her meaning plain, endeavored to explain. "Ye knows when a man dies, there's 2 parts to him. One they buries, and one goes." She pointed upward with her thumb, not irreverently, as merely wishing to indicate a fact without the expense of words. "Yes, I understand what you mean," he said slowly. "And under that theory, the soul—" "Under what?" she said sharply. "I mean that if you say the soul is divided from the body at death—" "But it is, ain't it?" she interrupted. "Yes, it is," he said, feeling that it was better to perjure himself than to shake her faith. "Go on," she said. "For Parson says the soul is the thing inside that thinks. But when a man's loony, you knows, off his head like, has he no soul then? I've looked in the catechis and in Bible and in prayer book, and for the life of me I don't know." "I don't wonder at that," he said with mechanical compassion, casting about in his mind for some possible motive for her extraordinary vehemence. He felt as certain standing there that this was a true woman, true to all the highest attributes of her nature, as if he had been able to weigh all the acts of her life and find none of them wanting. In the midst of his perplexity, he found time to ask himself whence he had this knowledge. Did he read it in the lines of her face, or was it some unseen influence of her mind upon his own? He had only time to question, not to answer, for she looked up in his face with the trust and expectation of a child awaiting his words. He spoke. "You say, when a man dies, he is divided into two parts, the body that rots and the part that lives elsewhere." He was speaking very slowly and distinctly. "If that part of a man which lives goes to heaven, where everything is quite different from this, he could have no use for most of his thoughts, what we call opinions, for they are formed on what he sees and hears and feels here. Look here." He held out his arm and moved it up and down from the elbow. "There are nerves and muscles. Behind them is something we call life. We don't know what it is. And behind your thoughts and feelings there is the same life. We don't know what it is. The part of you that you say goes to heaven must be that life. If you ask me what I think the greater part of what you call mind is part of your body. If your body can live a spirit life, so can it, but it would need as much changing first." It was most extraordinary to him to see the avidity with which she drank in his words, and also the intelligence with which she seemed to master them, for she cried, "What's it the soul, then? When ye will to do a thing again all costs, is that it the soul?" "Certainly the spirit must be the self, and the will, as far as we know, is that self, more that self than anything else is." He spoke in the pleased tone of a schoolmaster who finds that the mind beneath his touch is being moulded into the right shape. And besides, he supposed he could question her next. "I knowed that," she said with an intensity of conviction that confounded her listener. "I knowed the soul was will. It must be intelligence and will and probably memory," he said, beguiled into the idea that she was interested in the nicety of his theory, but not in any sense that activity of mind which shows itself in the opinions most men conceive so important. But of this she took no heed. "When a man's off his head or paralysed, with no more life in him than babe unborn, yet when he's living and not dead, where's his soul then? Parson, he says the soul's sleeping inside him afore going to glory, like a grub afore it turns into a fly. But I asked him how he knowed, and he just said he knowed, and I mun believe, and that's no way to answer an honest woman." "He did not really know." "Well, tell what you knows," she said. "Indeed, I do not know anything about it." "You don't know?" "I do not know." The animation of hope slowly faded from her face, giving place to a look of bitter disappointment. It was as if a little child, suddenly denied some darling wish, should have strength to restrain its tears and mutely acquiesce in the inevitable. "Then there's nowt to say," she said, rising, sullen in the first moment of pain. "But you'll tell me why you have asked," he begged. "I am very sorry indeed that I cannot answer." "Nah, I'll not tell ye, for it's no concern of yours. But thank ye kindly, sir, all the same. You're an honest man. Good day." With that, she walked resolutely away. Nor would she accept his offer of payment for the food she had given. He stood and watched her, feeling checkmated, until he saw her exchange greetings with the ploughman, who reached the end of his furrow as she passed the side of the field. Seeing this, he took up his specimens and walked slowly in the same direction, waiting for the ploughman's next return. As he stood at the hedge, he noticed that the labourer, who appeared to be a middle-aged man of average intelligence, surveyed him with more than ordinary interest. "Good day," he said. End of section 14.